Central banks and multilateral institutions are engineering an integrated digital financial architecture. The goal is a global network where capital moves through a frictionless mesh. Current economic literature frames non-participation as behavioral friction, a problem solved through optimization. Institutional models assume refined interfaces will shrink this demographic toward zero, but historical data reveals a hard mathematical floor. Non-participation always hits a limit between 3 and 5%. This persistent group is the resistant remnant, a substantial minority that remains outside the integrated system, regardless of its design or ease of use. Their refusal persists across various technical and social environments. It functions as a fixed strategic position that resists standard consumer behavioral interventions. Any financial model assuming universal adoption ignores the historical regularity of this permanent refusal class. Understanding the future of digital money requires looking back at 5 centuries of financial and identification mandates. Every comprehensive mandate regime on record includes a stubborn minority that successfully operates entirely outside the primary infrastructure. We saw this during the 2015 Greek capital controls. When the state gated access to the formal banking system, entire populations rapidly shifted to alternative substrates to maintain their daily lives. Survival networks followed a similar pattern during the Soviet era. Citizens developed extensive shadow economies to bypass state control, utilizing physical goods and informal networks. These historical analogs show that refusal populations are the predictable byproduct of mandate enforcement. The long-term steady state of a new financial architecture involves a bifurcated system where a dominant architecture must coexist with its outgroup. The digital architecture driving this global integration is built on 4 technological pillars, known collectively as the ABCD system. Pillar A, AI, compresses decisional autonomy through algorithmic rules. Pillar B, biometric ID, compresses bodily autonomy via irreversible enrollment. Pillar C, CBDC, compresses monetary autonomy with programmable money. Pillar D, digital control, compresses behavioral autonomy via transaction monitoring. Together, they form one integrated control surface. This integration replaces a decentralized financial society with a single administrative decision point. A single flag in this database can instantly sever access to banking, employment, housing, and healthcare. The ABCD system eliminates the analog, unmonitored human interaction that previously served as a societal escape valve. The spectrum of mandates is a 4-phase rollout typology. Phases 1 and 2 rely on voluntary framing and convenience to capture the majority. Phase 3, gating, is the inflection point. Participation becomes a hard condition for survival, gating access to travel and government benefits. India's Aadhaar rollout is a prime example of Phase 3 gating. Essential social services were tied directly to biometric identification. Phase 4, enforcement, deploys severe financial penalties and account freezes against the remaining holdouts. The 2022 Canadian Emergency Economic Measures Order demonstrated Phase 4 actions, using programmable financial freezes to immediately disable a coordinated protest. Systemic compliance emerges from the escalating structural impossibility of living outside the gated infrastructure. The resistant remnant comprises 5 distinct motivational substrates, each operating with its own internal logic. The religious, conscience, and communitarian substrates reject systemic integration as part of a multi-generational identity. For these groups, non-participation is a foundational tenet. The hard money and cypherpunk substrates reject centralized ledgers in favor of self-custody crypto, physical metals, and monetary privacy. While these groups often operate in isolation, the pressures of Phase 3 and 4 mandates force them into cross-substrate coalitions. These coalitions leverage layered legal defenses, utilizing constitutional originalism, state biometric privacy laws, and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to create a defensive infrastructure. A unified remnant possesses deep legal foundations, alternative physical assets, and total ideological conviction, elements that make them resistant to standard institutional pressure. The global digital finance landscape is trending towards a bifurcated equilibrium, a state defined by 2 separate coexisting populations. This equilibrium stabilizes once the costs of policing the boundaries become manageable for both the majority and the minority.
Minimal necessary interactions are handled through an interface layer, focusing on tax compliance, banking, and emergency access. This interface allows the central system to extract necessary compliance while permitting the remnant to maintain their analog operational boundaries. A bifurcated outcome represents a stable, realistic operating state for the future financial system. The managed outside hypothesis suggests that a totalizing system will eventually choose to tolerate rather than crush the refuser class. Legally and politically, the cost of hunting down the final three. Policymakers and institutional architects should recognize that planning for a universal mandate is an inefficient use of resources. The critical task for the coming decade involves engineering a durable, peaceful coexistence with the resistant remnant.